We shall now proceed to consider draft resolution A/71/L39 entitled "The Situation in the Syrian Arab Republic as Orally Corrected." Before giving the floor for explanations of vote before the vote, may I remind delegations that explanations of vote are limited to 10 minutes and should be made by delegations from their seats. I would request the membership that I see that I have 4 delegations wishing to make an explanation of position before the vote. And with your permission, I will close off that speakers list now in the interest of time. And I see no objection to that. So we have 4 speakers, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Trinidad and Tobago, and the Russian Federation. And with those 4 delegations keeping to 10 minutes, you'll be pleased to see that looking at the clock, we will be able to take a vote before the lunch break. So with that, I now am pleased to give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Iran for their explanation of position before the vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, the draft resolution on the Syrian Arab Republic placed before us today as L39 is a one-sided document and divorced from the reality on the ground in Syria. We agree that the situation in Syrian Arab Republic has been alarming in the past several years, and the humanitarian situation has been deteriorating. We also fully agree that the international community, represented by the United Nations, should do whatever in its power to address the humanitarian crisis in Syria. From the outset of the crisis, Iran, through its Red Crescent Society, has been actively engaged in the humanitarian operations in Syria. Iran, bearing in mind its moral and international commitments, will continue to assist Syrians in need of humanitarian assistance. However, it is evident, Mr. President, that this crisis is only the effect, and the draft is totally silent on its root cause. It's an established fact that terrorism and violent extremism are the root causes of the disaster. And it is the very issue that should be first and foremost addressed by the international community. Militants and terrorists that are led in Syria, mostly through lax borders, and are supported by some foreign countries, are responsible for the very difficult situation and the ongoing humanitarian disaster. It is again an established fact that a number of armed terrorist groups, such as Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusra and Jaish al-Fath, have been in control of and active in parts of a fellow member state of this organization, and the occupation by them of some densely populated regions has exacerbated the situation. The actions of these groups have been the main source of the suffering for the civilians and have and continue to be a tremendous challenge for humanitarian operations. They have spread terror and intimidation among the population, who they have forcibly used as human shields. Such a control of territory by feckless and reckless groups, no matter where it occurs, creates major threats and can kick off humanitarian crisis. It is exactly at the core of the problem we are facing in Syria. Given this established fact, I have a question for the main sponsors of this draft resolution. This question can also simply goes to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom, who blame others for their fight against terrorism. What they would do had part of their own territories have been occupied by similar terrorist groups. wouldn't they take military action to dislodge them? To resolve the crisis in Syria, we need to put an end to terrorist activities and at the same time continue our efforts towards a comprehensive and exclusively Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political settlement based on dialogue among Syrians without preconditions to end hostilities and reestablish peace and tranquility. These two actions should go hand in hand. This draft resolution is totally silent on these two major necessary actions. Thus, we will vote against this resolution. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished delegation of Iran, and I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Saudi Arabia.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. أود أن أشكركم على عقد هذا الاجتماع لمناقشة الوضع الإنساني الخطير في سوريا وما يتعرض له الشعب السوري من قبل السلطات السورية وحلفائها من عمليات قتل جماعي وتشريد وحصار وغير ذلك من الجرائم التي يندى لها جبين الإنسانية وتشكل جرائم ضد الإنسانية ينبغي التصدي لها ومواجهتها وإيقافها عند حدها. نقدر وفد بلادي الجهود التي بذلتها الدول المقدمة للقرار وخاصة كندا في سبيل إعداد هذه المسودة، كما نقدر حسن النوايا الذي صاحب مسيرة المشاورات حول هذا القرار. لأننا وبكل أسف نجد أن المحصلة النهائية للقرار لم ترتقي إلى مستوى معاناة الشعب السوري ولم تميز بما فيه الكفاية بين الجلاد والضحية، ولم توضح بجلاء مسؤولية السلطات السورية وحلفائها عما يرتكبونه من جرائم، بما في ذلك القصف الجوي للمناطق السكنية والمدنيين العزل والحصار والتجويع واستخدام الأسلحة الكيميائية وتشريد الملايين من الناس. وبذلك فإن هذا القرار لا يمكن أن تبرأ به الذمة أمام الله ثم أمام المجتمع الدولي والشعب السوري الصامت. ومع تقديرنا لهذه الجلسة التي خصصت لمناقشة الشأن السوري، إلا أننا نرى أن ما آلت إليه الأوضاع المأساوية في حلب وما اتضح جليا من عجز مجلس الأمن